Good afternoon. I would like to call to order the meeting of the Wilmington Cable, Video, and Telecommunications Commission for Friday, January the 17th. I am Trippy Congo, Chair of the CVT Commission. First, I would like to welcome all of our new members of this commission and to recognize that Councilmember Letitia Bracy is the Vice Chair. At this time, I would like to do a roll call for all commissioners. Vice Chair Bracy.
Present.
Commissioner Kobe Owens. Commissioner Maria Cabrera.
Present.
Commissioner Elijah Simmons.
Present.
Excuse me. Commissioner Kelly Williams. Commissioner John Rago.
Present.
Commissioner Terrence Williams.
Present.
And Commissioner Bob Goff.
Here.
All right, thank you, everyone. I would also like to acknowledge others who are in attendance this afternoon. We have Marshall Bassenite, our Senior Legislative Advisor and CFO from City Council. We have John Stant, the Assistant City Solicitor. Anita Hawks, our Legislative Admin Assistant. Gerry Lederer from Best and Best. Excuse me, Krieger Attorneys at Law. Jessica Sibley from Comcast, and Ivan Thomas from DETV. I would also like to recognize and count present Commissioner Kobe Owens. For the next CVT meeting slated for February the 14th, Comcast is going to be on our agenda to provide a summary of the services that they provide to the city of Wilmington. So with that being said, Jessica, if you can kindly introduce yourself to the commission.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Sibley. I'm Senior Manager of Government and Regulatory Affairs for Comcast, overseeing Newcastle County. I look forward to meeting with you all a little more thoroughly next month as we go over some of our product services and offerings that we have here in Wilmington. Until then, I will drop my contact information in the chat should anyone need anything, have any questions. I'm always happy to help. Marshall also has all of my contact information if need be. So thank you for having me today, and I look forward to next month.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, if you can please review the draft minutes from our October 28th CVT Commission meeting. I'll accept the motion to adopt the October 28th CVT meeting minutes.
So moved. Second.
Motion has been moved in second to adopt the October 28th minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes have been adopted. And now on to new business. We're going to have an update regarding the recently executed cable franchise agreement with Comcast and a high-level summary of the emerging telecommunications matters by outside counsel, Mr. Gerry Lederer. The purpose of this agenda item is for the awareness of the new commissioners and refreshers for the rest of us. Gerry?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm hoping that the technical folks have the PowerPoint there. Perfect. I've got an odd background behind me today. I serve as outside counsel to the U.S. Conference of Mayors, which is having their winter meeting. And the most famous of Delaware residents is about to speak upstairs. So it worked out that I wound up getting an empty conference room down here to do it. So if we could, as the chairman indicated, our goal today is just to make sure that everyone is on a level playing footing with respect to the recently executed Comcast cable franchise extension, and then to give you a heads up on some of the emerging telecom matters of concerns, or are they opportunities? Next slide, please. And we can skip that ugly guy. So this is where we are, big picture. We had a franchise with Comcast that was a 12-year franchise that would have expired last November. What we did was we sat down, we looked at the franchise, realized that, quite honestly, the terms of the franchise were really very robust. And so we wanted to preserve as much as we possibly could. But the one issue that we did have was that the way that we funded PEG in that agreement, we'd run out of money, or we'd run out of, we'd exhausted the requirement for Comcast to be providing support. Now, again, Comcast wasn't doing anything wrong. It just is the last payment that they were obligated to provide us was 3 years ago. So we wanted to refresh it so that we could start to get PEG again. And so that's what we're doing. We didn't go for a full renewal. We just did an extension. Again, that's something that was available to us that both Comcast and the city pursued. And the reason for that was we didn't want to spend significant funds up front doing a detailed needs analysis because, in fact, what we had in our existing franchise was as robust, if not more robust, than cities such as Wilmington were getting anywhere in the country. But as we walk you through the terms, I think you will see that what we did, though, is we consolidated the benefits that we did have, and we took away any obligations that we would do, we consolidated the benefits that we had, and we eliminated any ambiguities as to our ability to make that requirement. The last point I want to make, though, is that we also did a deep dive to make sure that, in fact, Comcast was in compliance with the terms of the franchise. And we, in fact, found that Comcast credit, they were very much in compliance. The only outstanding issue, and again, this is nothing unusual, is that our city auditor did engage an auditing firm to review the accuracy of our franchise fee payments. We have a report on that. I'm going to speak to that in just a second. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, what we wanted to do is we wanted to keep what we had, keep what was good, but improve where we could. And so the first thing, and again, this is Commissioner Rago's point, and he'll come in and make sure that I say this exactly correct. There was a standard that, for all intents and purposes, was a mandate that everyone in the city would be able to have access to Comcast without any contribution to construction. Typically, the way that a franchise works is that if your location is within a certain amount of linear feet from the plant, then you get the Comcast or the franchised operator for free. If it goes beyond that, then you have to make a contribution. One of the improvements we said is that every resident in Wilmington, everyone, regardless of where they live, has access to Comcast service without any contribution to construction. Next slide, please. Should Wilmington choose to expand or annex additional areas, it's that same level of service, that guaranteed payment of no fees would go to every place where there's a density of 20 homes per mile. Again, we looked in the area surrounding Wilmington, and we weren't sure who we could annex that wouldn't meet the standard. So I think it's very safe to say that everyone that's in Wilmington today has got guaranteed access to Comcast services with no additional payment for construction, and pretty much anywhere we might think that we would want to annex will be protected that way as well. Next slide, please. PEG support, as I mentioned, we were 3 years since our last PEG support. Comcast offered us $90,000 per year, but then asked us, and in fairness, they asked us to consider, could they do it on a per sub basis? That is, they give us 85 cents per subscriber per month in support of PEG. We thought that we might be able to make a bit of a combination between the two. We were able to document that our needs were greater than 85 cents, that in fact our needs were 95 cents. But because it is a reality that we've seen dramatic losses in the number of subscribers, we did not want to go to a straight per subscriber per month basis, because we could find ourselves not being able to budget with that type of system. And so what we agreed on is that Comcast is going to provide us 95 cents per sub per month, but in no year, none of the 5 years of this extension will that amount be less than $90,000. We're thinking that it's going to be probably 110 to 125 this year, but I would welcome any input from our colleague from Comcast. Next slide, please.
May I ask?
Sure. Hi, John.
Chair, may I ask a question? Should we hold questions until the end, or do you want questions now?
Yes, if we can hold questions until the end of the presentation. I'd also like to recognize Commissioner Kelly Williams, who has joined us.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. So the way these slides work is we explain the principle and then we show the language from the actual extension. Next slide, please. One of the other things that has happened, that has changed since we did our franchise in 2012, was that a great many of the PEG services are now being offered in HD. The reason for that is that the rest of the basic tier is in HD, and we didn't want PEG to be seen as sort of a less robust, video neighborhood. Our language 12 years ago said that after the 5th anniversary, the parties would get together to review, what's available in HD and where things stand in the rest of the tri-state area, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey. We thought, we want to get rid of that ambiguity. And so the extension provides that we are able to get HD conversion for our PEG channels upon 90 days request. Next slide, please. And again, so here's the language that's in the extension that talks about, the HD defines it and says that we're entitled to it within 90 days. Next slide, please. And then the other thing that happened in the last number of years is the first Trump administration, I guess we'll call that Trump 45 to distinguish from Trump 47. The Trump 45 administration came out with a very, very damaging order from the FCC that said that in-kind benefits that we get in a cable franchise, the cable operator can charge us the market value of those services. We were able to overturn part of that order. And again, Wilmington was a funding party in that, and we're still very grateful for that support. What the Sixth Circuit said is that, yes, the cable operator is allowed to assign a value to in-kind services, but the in-kind valuation should be the cost to the cable operator, not its market value. And so whenever we did an agreement, we had to acknowledge that is different than it was in 2012. What Comcast did, and again, I think they were generous. They go beyond what they have to do legally here. They provide for the continuation of in-kind benefits to the city of Wilmington, to our public buildings, our government buildings, our schools, libraries, and that. But they do it, we write it up in such a way that it's in compliance with the Trump first or Trump 45 FCC rules. You'll hear it sometimes referred to as the 621 order. That's the cable franchise section. Next slide, please. So here's the summary of where we are. We are in the first couple of months of a 5-year extension. So the 5-year extension provides that we continue to receive the maximum allowed cable franchise fee. It's approximately $3.5 million per year. It provides for the continued financial support for our PEG or our community media program that's no less than $450,000 over the term. Again, guaranteed 90 a year, but we're actually above that level this year, depending upon where we are with subs. We may be significantly above the 450 over the life of it. It provides that we can do community media in HD. It assures that all residents have non-discriminatory and free access to services within the city. And this is perhaps the most important thing of all, it maintains all existing franchise benefits, including complimentary services and customer service standards that are present in the Wilmington franchise at a higher level, a more robust level than they are under the FCC standards, and we're allowed to do that. Next slide, please. The other thing is and the chair has made sure that and through the staff that we always carry this, and that is, while we're very, very proud to have Comcast as a corporate citizen and a partner in this, the city will continue to look to see what we can do in encouraging additional cable providers to come in and offer competition. So this is to make very clear to all the new commissioners, this is not an exclusive franchise. We have the ability to go out and offer a cable franchise to any other entity that's willing to come in and enter into terms. Now, the terms have to be similar to Comcast, or Comcast gets to come back and renegotiate. But again, we always put this in and make very clear that the city of Wilmington is open to competition, and we'd like to have conversations with any parties that would like to pursue that. Next slide, please. Okay. And now this is sort of looking forward. Marshall asked if I could sort of give you a heads up on what's happening elsewhere and things that this committee might think about addressing above and beyond what's happening in cable. There's a terrible threat to us right now. There's a program called the Universal Service Funds. The Universal Service Funds are funds that we each pay when we pay our phone bill, whether it's our cell phone or our landline phone bill. And there's a fee on top of that that goes to support the affordable availability of both internet to a certain extent, but mostly dial tone. It also helps underwrite the services to schools and libraries. A very conservative think tank has challenged that. It's before the Supreme Court right now. I'm sorry. They challenged it. They challenged it in 3 or 4 different circuits. Most of the circuits found that the program was constitutional. Very quickly, their argument is because Congress is the only one that can lay taxes. If they grant that authority to establish this universal service fund to the FCC, that's an impermissible delegation of authority. And then they argue then the FCC uses an outside firm, the Universal Service Access Corporation, to help them manage this, that's a further unconstitutional delegation of authority. So that's what's before the court. A number of the circuit courts have said, no, this is fine. It's not an illegal delegation of authority. One circuit, however, did find that it was, and that's the Fifth Circuit. In Supreme Court litigation, you will find an awful lot of the decisions that are coming out of the Fifth Circuit are the most conservative of all the circuits, so it's not surprising. That is before the court. The court has not yet scheduled oral argument. We will keep you abreast. We did file a brief on behalf of local governments, just talking about just how important universal service is in making the quality of life of Wilmington and other citizens in urban America important. And we also then speak to rural America. So that's there. But that's something that this committee should be have at least on its radar to think about whether or not we're going to have to respond to that in some way, shape, or form. The other thing that's happening, and this is thanks to President Biden, is that there's significant funding coming to Delaware for both the BEAD, which is the construction program, and the digital integration funding program. And there's an awful lot of that money coming to Delaware, and it's not clear how much of it shows up in Wilmington. I have shared with Marshall the large grant that that Delaware State has received. This committee might in fact want to look to see, are there programs that you ought to be pursuing, championing. I know that was very important as we were discussing cable. It was an issue that kept coming up, so I raised that. And then the last bit is that there was a law that was issued in New York State which provides a mandate that if you are a broadband provider in that state, you have to offer a $10 low income a broadband starter kit. That survived judicial challenges at the state level and in the federal courts. And so the question is that type of law, should we be telling the Delaware legislature that we think that that type of law makes a great deal of sense? Because it's not, Comcast isn't the only broadband provider, and they do offer what they call digital starter, or they do have but we have other broadband providers in the state, and right now they're not offering anything to the low income residents, and is this something that we want to think about? And again, the law has already been written. It was written in New York State. The thought was perhaps this committee would want to look at that and make a recommendation through the mayor's office or through the city council office to the Delaware legislature that maybe this is something that we ought to consider. I believe that's the last slide. So I'm ready for questions, Mr. Chairman, or however you'd like to proceed.
All right, thank you, Gerry. I'd like to recognize Councilman Hackett, who has joined us. Commissioner Rego, did you have any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had one question. When Gerry was going through the PEG subsidy, 95 cents per subscriber, not less than $90,000 a year, and then $450,000 a year over the 5 years
Correct.
of the extension. Is this is the same under the previous agreement? This was about only $60,000 a year, right?
In fairness, to compare apples to apples, the previous agreement had significant upfront payments to purchase equipment and to supplement your infrastructure. So yes, we're very proud of the number. We're very proud of the number. But it's different than what was in the original agreement. It would not be fair to say 60 is what it was and we're up to 90 now, because that 60 was subsidized by large capital grants, John.
I see. Okay, so
Yeah.
so
See, this is the problem when you have second generation lawyers from the same firm that did doing your thing. I can't badmouth the predecessors. I have to give them credit.
Sure.
They're the founders of the firm.
Okay, but the 90,000 per year
Yes.
is sufficient to support the PEG channels, and that would include purchase of equipment.
The $90,000 is in fact limited to capital expenditures.
I see.
And again, I think that I think that there are challenges that the city is facing with respect to the division of its resources, but that's outside of my expertise, and I know that Marcel's going to be speaking to you about that.
Okay.
We know that we have budget decisions that we have to make because of the funding levels.
Okay. And the only other thing I'd like to say is I applaud the city for continuing to find, even though we appreciate our relationship with Comcast, it's incumbent upon us to continue to try to find other providers for the purposes of competition, purposes of keeping the monthly costs low for people who are subscribers. And it comes up all the time after we have a cable commission meeting. And I just want folks who may be watching to know this commission has never rejected any kind of other provider coming forward. Many years ago, Verizon wanted to offer video services, but then they withdrew their application before the city of Wilmington. A lot of people always think the city rejected Verizon, but we did not. And I just wanted, for history purposes, to make sure those viewing today's meeting know that. Thank you.
Last time I looked, we still have that document with Verizon, so that they'd like to renew the discussions. We're ready to go.
Yeah, come on, let's go, Verizon.
All right, thank you. Do any other commissioners have questions? Commissioner Bracy?
Thank you, Gerry, for
Commissioner.
always doing a great job of presenting all of the issues. I did have one question about matters of concern. I noticed that the future of cable and franchise agreements wasn't listed as a concern. And what I'm thinking about is, and this is for our viewing audience and also the commissioners, with streaming becoming extremely popular and that's the wave of the future, what point do you think we need to really start looking at what our CTV, our cable commission and the franchise agreement looks like moving into the next decade? Because with more people streaming and less people getting cable, at some point this could become a concern. It seems like it might not be one right yet, but when should we start really being concerned about that?
Okay, Commissioner, you're exactly correct, and I would suggest that in fact the change or the shift from cable subscribers to broadband subscribers is probably is recognized in this franchise, in that we don't go with a straight 95 cents per sub per month PEG support. We did insert a minimum per year. The question that you were asking, Commissioner, is so vitally important. There's significant disagreement. Let me put it that way. There's significant disagreement between local government counsel and your professional staff and the providers as to what's a cable service and what's a stream. And we think that there are some artificial distinctions that have been drawn. We don't understand why it is that if I'm watching a movie on HBO on my Comcast system, that is subject to a franchise fee. But if I watch that same movie on the same TV connected with the same cable box, but instead of being on HBO, it's on Hulu. It's not that we think that there are artificial distinctions being brought there. We think that there's a litigation Donnybrook to come, and so I think what we're looking to do is we're looking to preserve and protect the assets for the city of Wilmington until we can get enough allies to take that on. Because we can talk all the technicalities that we want, but when all is said and done, what a cable franchise is it's a real estate document. It's a real estate document that says you get to come in and use the public assets. That is the rights of way of the citizens of Wilmington. And in exchange for that, the rent that you're going to pay is a percentage of the gross income that you generate. Well, that's a very simple and very easily understood program, and that's what we all thought that we were doing, not only in 2012, but in the franchises that we did before. Little did we know that the FCC, upheld by the Supreme Court in a case called Brand X, would say that, but the cable companies now get to, not just the cable companies, but broadband providers get to exclude what they're calling a streaming service because that's not a cable service. So, yeah, it's a challenge that we're facing. It's a challenge that we're looking at. It's one of the reasons why we were very happy to do an extension of this cable franchise for 5 years with the robust terms that we have. But you're right, ma'am, that the conversion from traditional cable to broadband is something that very much needs to be on this commission's agenda, not necessarily for action in the immediate future, but clearly to be aware of what's happening and to be ready to join the fray when there are a sufficient number of folks to take on that challenge.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Do any other commissioners have any questions? Commissioner Owens.
Hello, how are you? Good afternoon. I had a quick question about the BEAD funding.
Yes, sir.
Delaware got about $107 million and has only used about $5 million of that. In your expertise of working with other municipalities, what have you seen them around the size of Wilmington be able to do with money like that when they go for a request? Most of the money is set aside for flexibility of the state government, but from the $5 million so far, most of it has gone to very rural parts of the state.
Commissioner, I'm glad that you asked the question because it gives me an opportunity to apologize to you in person for mistaking your name the other day. If we're being absolutely perfectly honest, the BEAD program was created to provide an infrastructure solution to residences that were unserved or underserved. And in fairness, Wilmington and pretty much every other urban area in the Northeast is not going to see any BEAD money or very little BEAD money. And the reason for that is you're not being punished, but it is a result of the great work that this commission and the city of Wilmington did to enforce the build-out requirements of our cable franchise, right? The citizens of Wilmington have access to broadband today because your build-out obligation in the Comcast franchise was not only very robust, but it was enforced. It was enforced, and I should also say, and Comcast honored it, right? I mean, we enforced it, but they honored it. I don't want to say that it wouldn't have happened otherwise. And so we tried to make a significant battle. And when I say we, I mean, I was representing the Conference of Mayors, the League of Cities, the National Association of Counties. We tried to make the point that an unserved or an underserved home has to have some sort of an acknowledgement of the cost of the service. You know, if a service goes by the house and it's $10,000 a month, is that house technically served? Is service available? Yeah, but it's not affordable. So how does that work? And we were not successful in that. I will tell you that what most urban areas are doing is they're competing for BEAD money to assist the upgrade of the wiring in large multi-tenanted environments, apartment houses, et cetera, because a number of the apartment houses were wired so long ago, especially in a traditional community like Wilmington, that it's not clear that the wiring is sufficient to provide the scalability of broadband that's necessary. Like, for instance, in the state of Maryland, they've taken some of their money and they've created a wiring fund where each county can then go in and show MTEs, and they're doing it that way. Another way that they're doing it is people are talking about long runs. Remember how I said everybody in the city of Wilmington is guaranteed? Well, not every local government has the same protections. And so they're taking some of their funds and they're using those to assist individuals get service to their building when their building is too far away from the network. The real focus for us needs to be the second part of BEAD, or the second part of the broadband money, the digital integration funding. That's the funding that's supposed to be there for education, for equipment, and to assist if necessary in supporting the connection. As I said, there's a big grant that was just earmarked for Delaware State University. Again, it's not for the university; it's for them to implement. And so my question would be, have we reached out to them to say, so how do you plan to support the residents of Wilmington in this grant? Having the same conversation with the the Wilmington broadband office. Now, we've had a change of governors, so I mean there may be a shift over, a change in staff, probably not significant, but are we interacting with the newest people, at the state capitol? I mean, it's within our city, but at the state capitol, to make sure that they have the digital needs, the digital integration needs of the citizens of Wilmington, first and foremost. I have looked at the Delaware map, and Councilman Owens, you're exactly correct. Almost all of the unserved or underserved areas are in I'm going to say the rural areas of Delaware. But if you look at the map, that's sort of defined as everywhere outside of Wilmington and the immediate suburbs. There's a map that will show you where the unserved folks are. And again, as I believe it, and people can correct me on this, the primary beneficiary of the BEAD funding right now is going to be Verizon, for sort of the beach areas and the upper areas, and then sort of in the Dover area, that's primarily going to be Comcast. There's a bit of a controversy. I believe the name of the company is Talkie, that has been challenging some of the claims. But again, I think our goal is to make sure we know the money that's coming in for digital integration, and to find out from the people that are getting that money, how do they plan to serve Wilmington. We'd like to have some say in how those funds are used.
Any follow-up, Commissioner Owens?
I did have another question. Thank you, Chair. I did have another question. So I was reading some other agreements from other cities, and some of the initiatives and programs that they were able to get into it. And I was just wondering if we have anything like that, or if there's opportunity to. I know one of the things in Philly that really stuck out to me was the expansion of the Internet Essential program, that offers low-cost internet, fully loaded computers, and a Wi-Fi router to every low-income family that have school-aged children. One of the things about our Delaware educational system is one of the worst in the nation. We rank about 45. And we saw during the pandemic, we have a huge digital divide here in the city of Wilmington, especially. And I was just wondering, is there opportunity for us to kind of work in to kind of fill in some of those gaps? Another one was they got a 10% discount for the limited basic digital starter cable services for low-income seniors.
Yes, sir. I'm glad that you find those terms impressive. I think you need to tell us all what year was that franchise negotiated, and I know the answer to that, by the way, because I did negotiate that. I would welcome Jessica here. I think that one of the things you'll find is that the whole digital starter, or low income package, was just coming online back when that Philadelphia franchise was being negotiated. And today, Comcast makes that service available and made a presentation to this committee on that. So, but Jessica, can you tell everyone today what Comcast is already offering without it being in the franchise?
One second, please, Jessica. Michelle.
Yeah. So it is planned for Comcast to come into the February meeting to talk about the different services and to present to the body of council on those issues, as well as what Comcast does for the city of Wilmington. I just wanted to make sure that we stay on the agenda, because that particular item is for the February meeting, and I just want them to be prepared with a presentation. I just wanted just to mention that, Chairman.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. So Commissioner Owens, is it okay if we follow up next month? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
And Commissioner, there are benefits that are in our franchise extension that we didn't list here, and a senior discount is one of them. So I think we have the opportunity to come back and let you know that we didn't negotiate for the low income internet because we were already getting, the marketplace was already providing it. Whereas in Philadelphia back in the early 2000s, it was only coming on board. And so that's why we negotiated for it there.
All right, thank you. Do any other commissioners have any questions, comments? Does anyone from the public have any questions or comments? Okay, if not, we will move on to our next agenda item. Now we're going to have a summary review of the Comcast franchise fees audit and the suggested next steps by Gerry.
Yes, sir. Just very quickly, our auditor engaged outside firm to come in and do the audit. We actually have 3 other audits of Comcast being conducted at the same time in other communities. We just want to, again, it appears that our auditor did a very good job. There were just a couple of questions that we want to confirm that they examined, and then we will sit down with Comcast and we will move that along. As I put in the PowerPoint, and I think that we need to make this very clear, Comcast substantially complied with their obligations. There are always tweaks. There are always folks that are miscoded in the wrong community, or different things happen, and Comcast has already acknowledged in their preliminary response to our audit that is correct, and they will make good on that. We just want to check on a couple of other things to make sure that our auditor examined those lines.
All right, thank you. Any comments or questions from any commissioners? Anyone from the public? Any comments or questions? All right, we'll move on to our next agenda item. Next, we are going to have a summary review of the solvency of the CVT fund. Michelle?
Yes, WITN, if you can put up the PowerPoint, please. Next slide, please. So one of the things that Gerry had mentioned, this is a 5-year extension of the Comcast agreement. Over the 5 years, we're going to get approximately $3.5 million for the maximum allowed for cable franchise fees for the 5%. In addition, we get additional $450,000, which is funding for the community channels guarantee. That's a minimum of $90,000 per year, as well as the 95 cents per subscriber. Next slide, please. So when we look at this as a high level, just looking at it over 5 years, so the Comcast cable franchise fees is going to come to roughly $3.5 million over 5 years. WITN's budget projection for 5 years is roughly estimated at $6.1 million. So the net difference is roughly $2.4 million. When we look at our Comcast community channels funding for a minimum guarantee of $450,000 over 5 years, the TPO cost projection over 5 years is $629,000. So that comes to a shortfall of roughly $180,000. Currently, the available funds in our CVT fund balance as of our fiscal year 24 ACFR, which is our annual comprehensive financial report, is roughly $2.5 million. So I'm just saying, like, when we make decisions, we will have to draw down from our savings account. Next slide, please. So just from looking at our Comcast cable franchise fees, if we look at it for 5 years out, and if we start with year one, we're looking at getting roughly $783,000 for year one, and if we look at total, comes to $3.5 million. WITN's budget for year one is $1,150,549. So with year one, we'd be in a shortfall of $366,749. And what we do is we will draw down out of our $2.5 million savings that we currently have. So in total, these go back to the numbers that was on the previous slide. This is how we get to the $3.5 million in franchise fees over 5 years, and the cost for WITN over 5 years is roughly $6.1 million. Next slide, please.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Rego.
Can we ask a question here?
Yes.
Yes. Go back to
Okay.
the previous slide.
Yes.
WITN.
Thank you, Marshall. Marshall, I was just curious about year 5 drop off.
Oh, yes. So, so the year 5 drop-off is basically when Comcast presented their presentation to the CVT Commission back in August. They mentioned that the total franchise fees that they projected over 5 years was $3.5 million. So that's the reason the 5th year is drop-off, because I just wanted our numbers to match theirs. But really, by the time I had did my calculation, it came in a little bit higher. But so that's the reason to drop off.
I see. In other words, but it doesn't mean it's a drop off related to a continual loss of subscribers.
No.
Okay.
Yes, and thank you for asking that
Alrighty.
question.
Okay. Thank you.
Next slide, please. When we look at Comcast funding for the community channels, the 5 years, and this year will be the funds that we use to cover our TPO. The minimum guarantee is $90,000, so I'm just basing it on the minimum guarantee of $90,000. Our current lease agreement that the city pays is $102,000. The current utilities the city pay is roughly $9,700. The current cable cost we pay is roughly $6,000. So by the time we take our costs less the projected money that we get, we'll be in a whole $27,000. So once again, we just take the difference and we draw down from our savings. So once again, in total, the minimum funding guarantee by Comcast is $450,000. By the time we subtract all our utilities and cable costs, we would have a net difference of $178,000 over the 5 years. And I just want to mention too, we do factor in some minimum equipment costs, because we know that we do need to replace equipment, but that type of cost also, it will come from our savings account. Next slide, please. So the CVT Commission at some point, will have decisions to consider regarding the solvency. So this here is just listed, doesn't mean this is what the CVT Commission is going to do. So when it comes to funding for the PEG, which is the Public Education Government Live Leased Assets, particularly with the government, you possibly need to consider at some point, we're going to look at general fund at some point for costs, or we're going to seek other grant funding. When it comes to funding for the public live assets and the TPO, are we going to possibly consider some type of shared use of facilities and staffing so that the city does not have like a lease payment, some type of cost sharing when it comes to like replacement equipment. So all of these things are things that need to be considered, but it's beyond things that's just on this slide. I know that at some point soon, we just need to just to revisit, to have conversations, because I just want the commissioners just to be informed regarding the solvency of the fund. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Marshall. Are there any questions or comments from any commissioners? Commissioner Bracey?
Thank you. I just thank you, Marshall, for bringing this to our attention, and I think this is a conversation that we'll probably need to have sooner rather than later, because if you just start with the very first slide, if our fund balance right now is 2.5, we're going to completely deplete that. More so by year 4 than even by year 5, we'll be completely out of funds. So I do think being proactive and having this conversation now is important, so I appreciate you bringing this up. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners?
Mr.
Krieger?
Chair.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess I would just like to repeat, it's something that we've talked about at previous meetings, but just the history here for those watching and for new commissioners. You know, for years we got by with bringing in enough money that we could cover these costs without having to dip into the operating fund. And Marshall, the numbers you're presenting obviously show that we've run out of days now. We have to start thinking about what the future holds. And that just shows you, I mean, it's expensive when you accept the PEG channels, and you decide you're going to have PEG channels. It does cost money. So now it's before us to try to figure out what to do for the future. But thanks for the presentation, Marshall.
Commissioner Williams?
Chair, the cost may actually be a lot higher if the tariffs go into play with the next administration. So if our numbers don't have that in the projection, as Commissioner Bracy mentioned, year 4 may be more realistic to those funds running out, just with the tariffs going into effect and our projected costs going up.
All right, thank you. Any other commissioners? Marshall?
Yeah, so I just want to echo some of the sentiments made by Commissioner Rago. And the reason we're fortunate enough to have the $2.5 million in our savings is because in the years when franchise fees was substantially higher than like what WITN's operating budget was, we made, we just took good diligence just to make sure those funds for these tough times like now that we can have something to draw down on. And as far as Commissioner Terrence Williams, as far as like the tariffs, these are just like projections, just to give us like a realistic look. But yes, these numbers, could change. The year 1 number is based upon WITN's fiscal year 2025 budget. They typically don't spend the full amount of their budget. And also the numbers we factor in there too is like we do factor in equipment costs that we need for our TPO as well. So although we have the TPO equipment and everything, that's the city's equipment, right? So it's our responsibility to make sure that we have adequate funds for equipment for both WITN as well as our TPO.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners have any questions or comments? Anyone from the public have any questions or comments? Marcia, I have a question for you. What time frame are we working with as far as having to make some decisions?
So the time frame, that's a fully loaded question, but I just want to just to mention some things. Is we do a annual lease agreement for our TPO that's located at 1105 North Market Street. So that commits us to $102,000 right now. I assume it's going to go up approximately 3% probably every year. As of right now, our TPO agreement is a 3-year contract with 2 one-year renewals. So that would take us 5 years. So all I can say is that $2.5 million, based upon the rate, if we keep our expenditures the same, that $2.5 million is going to be depleted by year 4. So realistically, we just need to start determining how we're going to do things differently. And decisions are going to have to be made, or to have some type of creative solutions. I don't know what those are, but we're working together to find out some possible solutions. I know that our TPO, I know that DTV, Mr. Thomas has some suggestions. I know that Wendell, our station manager, have some suggestions, as well as our chief of staff, Elijah, has some suggestions. So we're just trying to eventually get together to see what it could look like. I know I didn't answer your question directly, but
No,
just
I
a fully
appreciate
loaded.
that.
Okay.
So once that money is depleted, what happens?
So once that money is depleted, some possibilities, and I'm not sure because I don't want to speak for the administration. If people value what the government channel does, as well as what the public channel does, do we tap into general fund dollars for the government portion? I know for the P, we couldn't, because they have some political things possibly connected with that. So that will be number one. And that will require a conversation, with the administration as well as with counsel. Number two is just seeing, how we can do things differently when it comes to television. Because we know the number of subscribers has gone down immensely. We know that I don't believe television subscribers is going to be the future. So now people are doing more streaming. So do we need to look at something differently? Because right now, and I don't mean to keep repeating myself, but our franchising is based upon cabling, the wires in our street. And I don't see, people using that. So we're going to have to be creative, and we probably need to establish some type of small subcommittee. Probably the sooner the better to start looking at some of these things, so we can make some affirmative decisions to present to the CBT Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Ivan? Mr. Thomas?
When you look at your budget of, was it 1.9, and our budget is around 2.22, it takes a lot to run both stations. Just to put out there, somehow maybe we both can work together and have maybe one station to put out all this content. Because we're putting out, since we started in 2019, we put out over 4,000 pieces of content, and if it's one piece or a series. But the thing about it, what we do know is you're going to run out of money real fast. Mm-hmm. And where can we cross hairs that we don't have to keep duplicating services? And that's what I see that's going to happen when you look at yours and look at us. You have your own lane, we have our own lane. We're the community, and our numbers on the streaming side are going through the roof. We can monetize those dollars on our end, but you can't do anything on your end. So just to put it out there, maybe if it's some way that we can figure a nice medium where we can work together, because I know a lot of your money goes towards the benefits for your employees. A lot of mine goes out for the contractors and the young people that I hire. And what we're working on right now is a deal, something with Delaware State University to get more students involved so those students can be employed here and stay here and become taxpayers here in Delaware. So we need to have this conversation really fast before next year. Because even with the studio, you're paying for the rent upstairs in the studio, I'm paying for the rent downstairs in my studio, and majority, and even with the lease access, there are, I believe, how many accounts do we have now of lease access? Four, and 2 of those are offline. They're not coming in the studio. So everything that you see is what DETV generates that keeps the community going. So we need to have that conversation fast.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that has a question or comment? And no commissioners? All right, we'll move on to our next agenda item. We're going to review a draft agreement for the city's third-party operator, TPO, pertaining to an ordinance to approve and authorize the public access and lease access management agreement between the City of Wilmington and the DETV Foundation Incorporated. This will be brought to us by John Stant, our Assistant City Solicitor.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. After Ivan's comments kind of lead into where we're at, I want to start with a brief timeline for everyone. As Marshall said, in April of 2024, the city leased space at 1105 North Market. The rent's $8,500 a month, $102,000 a year. We've subleased that space to DETV. We're paying the rent for that space. It ends March 31st, 2025. There is no need to give a 60-day lease termination notice. The lease will end either through us telling BPG that we don't want to rent the space anymore, or just as of March 31st, 2025, if no new agreement is signed. In July of 24, the Comcast franchise extension was introduced into council. It passed. The mayor signed it, I believe, in October. It discussed requiring a third-party operator. So over the last summer, Marshall and I worked and drafted and published a RFP for third-party operator services. This time, unlike other RFPs, given the CATV's solvency issues, we put in that the TPO provider must pay 25% of the rent of any leased space to help blunt some of the cost concerns that this commission has. At the October, DETV was the only responder to the RFP, and at the October 28th, 2024 meeting, this commission selected it as our third-party operator. There's a contract that the city has to sign with DETV to become the third-party operator. As Marshall said, it's a 3-year contract with 2 one-year renewals. Under the charter, it must go before council. An ordinance was drafted and submitted and heard as first and second on November 7th, 2024. It ended up being held, I believe, in committee because there was apparently some misunderstanding regarding the 25% requirement. It ultimately died at the end of the 108th session. Tentatively, it will be reintroduced as a first and second piece of legislation on February 6th of this year. I already have the legislation drafted. All I had to do is change the dates and the agenda number. We do have some looming deadlines that as I said, the lease ends from North Market on March 31st of 2025. And as Marshall and Ivan both pointed out, there are some serious financial concerns that this commission needs to consider. So that is the timeline for what will happen next. The other thing I want to mention, Gerry mentioned earlier that the New York spill regarding, I know I'm switching topics, regarding broadband was $10 a month. He was way too generous. Sorry, Gerry. It's $15 a month for basic service and $20 a month for high-speed broadband. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the law. I would guess that the city doesn't have the ability to mandate this kind of broadband requirement, and that we would have to ask the state to do so, usually done through a resolution. Thanks, Gerry. So that's my brief presentation on the timeline for what's to come.
All right, thank you, Gerry. Do any commissioners have any questions, comments? Commissioner Bracy.
Thank you, Mr. Have we had any conversations about the future of the lease yet, or is that to come?
That's to come. In past years, it has not been an issue getting the lease signed, even up to at the 11th hour to get a lease signed. However, that was with the old location on Lancaster Avenue. I don't foresee BPG giving us a hard time, but I can't promise that they won't.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Rego.
Yeah, I'll just repeat what I've said many times at these meetings. We just had a presentation of the numbers and the decisions that are facing this commission and the city regarding the future of PEG channels and so on. but I still don't understand how we're striking a lease agreement that requires the TPO. And let me say this, I should have said this in the beginning. I'm not speaking for Ivan. I'm not speaking for DETV. This could have been any TPO, anyone who came forward. I just don't understand how we're charging the TPO to pay part of the rent. The rent obligation is the city's responsibility, not the TPO's. And if the TPO wants to go along with it, that's fine. But I just, it's there. What we're doing is we're creating artificial numbers here. The situation is actually worse without the TPO having to pay 25%. And I think we ought to stick to what the real numbers are. And what this does is, as Marshall was showing us in Chair, when you asked the question, what does this mean for the future? It means that we have to make some tough decisions about having PEG channels and how to fund those PEG channels. But in the meantime, I just don't think we ought to be creating artificial numbers, and having the TPO pay 25% is creating an artificial situation. I think the city has the obligation. It was almost like what we did on Lancaster Avenue. We were making the TPO responsible for air conditioning and heating systems if they broke down. It just didn't make any sense. That's my opinion. And I thank you for the opportunity to voice it.
Thank you. I do have a question for the commissioners and everyone who is a part of the conversation. So is this a decision that we need to kind of buckle down and make during this meeting, or are we going to have some offline meetings? Like, how do we move forward? Because the numbers are pretty real. So how do we move forward?
I would suggest, Council President, that I would take Ivan's suggestion seriously and sit down. I don't know if there's a way to, if you want to have a few members of the commission, I don't want to run into FOIA issues where you have everyone get together and you have to have a public meeting. But if you have some representatives get together with Ivan to maybe hammer out something, I think that would be very prudent.
Commissioner Cabrera?
Yes, I share the same concern that was just mentioned by Commissioner Rago. I think we definitely have to sit down and have some further discussion on this. I think there's a lot of investment that's been made. The product speaks for itself. We have excellent programming, top-notch, very professional. We want to continue to have that quality, but the real question is this going to present a hardship, and what type of other funding is coming in that could help offset these costs? But if the agreement was that, the city is responsible for their portion of the cost, passing it on to the TPO might change the trajectory and the outcome of, the quality of the product. And will that create a hardship? So definitely a discussion I think we need to have moving forward before we make a definitive decision on this or take a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bracy?
Thank you. Two things. One question. In past TPO agreements, who was responsible for the lease? When it was, I guess, the previous TPO provider, were they responsible for the lease, or was it? For the lease payments, the city was. The city was. So when it was LAPA or whatever. Okay.
And I'm sorry, Chair.
Yes, Ms. Bassanite.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit context. So, I mean, the TPO operates on behalf of the city, but when it was LAPA, they paid the difference of the lease. So meaning we received $60,000 a year back then, and LAPA paid the difference for that lease agreement, and they paid their utilities. When we changed over to the new TPO, the CBT Commission decided that the city will be responsible for the entire lease as well as covering utility costs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Follow?
Commissioner Bercy, yes.
Thank you. So I just want to say that I agree that I think we should have some offline conversations. I'd be happy to be a part of that, and I think it might be good to include WITN station manager in those conversations as we're trying to look creatively as how we partner together. I think getting all of the parties in the room together is a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Marshall?
Yeah.
And then Mr. Thomas.
And I just want to acknowledge, like, from a timing perspective, we have something like set up for some meetings. But one of the things is, if we are moving forward with the TPO, as John mentioned, this is tentatively slated for the February 6th council agenda. And for the February 6th council agenda, we would have to have that posted by Thursday, January the 30th. So I just want to put that in people's, mind, like when it comes to time frame. And there was a comment mentioned, regarding like a vote. So I just want to just remind everybody, like this agreement, like it is for review. The actual vote is by the council when it comes up for first and second, when it goes to finance committee, when it goes to third and final. And also just to remind that the CVT commissioners did select DETV as its TPO at the October meeting.
Thank you. So I guess it's obvious that we want to keep DETV as our TPO. They're doing a great job. We want to make them as whole and keep them as whole as we can. We want to do the same for WITN, but we do have some decisions to make. So do you think that we need to postpone that February meeting for council and council votes? Well, I guess I would want Mr. Thomas to chime in too. And we can kind of have just an informal conversation. I don't want to do anything that's going to hurt them. I know we have to protect, our funding, but what's the best case scenario for us moving forward? I don't think that we're going to come to a decision in a week or so. So how can we?
So
what's the best case scenario for everyone who's involved?
So Chair, if you'd like me to, just to go back to for a timing perspective, if we don't target like the February 6th council meeting, then I would highly suggest nothing later than February the 20th. Okay. The reason I say February the 20th is because then you would have to have a finance committee meeting in March, and then it would have to be third and final in March, because the TPO agreement really expires the end of March. So that's one scenario. The other scenario is we could possibly, if we need to do another 1 year agreement with the TPO to work things out, till we can get some more finality to what we're going to do. I believe that probably will be the best option, rather than locking into a 3-year agreement with 2-year renewals. So I would think that would be the best. We don't have to make a decision like right now. We can schedule the small meetings for discussion. So we won't target the February 6th meeting for introduction.
Okay, Mr. Thomas, I know you asked. Did you have any questions or comments? You're good. Okay. Does that work with you? Yeah. Your team? Okay.
I think
Can you come to the mic, please?
I'm all for if we can meet sooner, maybe offline, because when we're looking at this big thing for a whole nother year, we're talking about a whole nother bunch of money that's going out if we're locking in year to year leases. So if we can, just to put it out there, if we can meet offline, that'll probably bring some clarity to it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. Mm-hmm. Someone mentioned FOIA earlier, so.
Yeah, we'll make sure we don't have any. So when we do the members, we'll make sure we don't have a quorum of the CBT Commission. Okay. And as well as any quorums of other meetings of the council members. So we'll make sure that doesn't occur when we schedule it.
Okay. Mr. Stant?
I don't know if you had anything further. Council President, that's why I came back up here.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Elijah? Chief of Staff?
I just wanted wanted to make just a quick comment that in all of this, there are two options. We can continue with the contract agreement with DETV, or we can look at methods to where we bring WITN and the entities who operate that.
Council President, can you tell them to turn his microphone?
Oh, it's not on. Sorry.
Is the microphone on?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
now we
Sorry
can
about
hear
that. Yeah. So
Yep.
I said with all of this, I feel like there's two options. We can look at avenues to where we can integrate with DETV, or look at another method to where we bring the entity that is WITN and those that operate that and bring them to council, but figure out a way where we can talk with the administration to see how it is that we can bring those folks there and formulate some form of compromise, just because I know that right now it's like an eminent domain that we're looking at. And just I would hate to see it come down to a point where folks are losing their job and they're not able to provide anymore for their families or something like that. So I really think that, like Ivan had said, this is something that we should look at as soon as possible and not delay in any kind of way. So.
All right, thank you. Any other commissioners have any questions or comments? Does anyone from the public have any questions or comments? All right, thank you, Marshall. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
All right, I want to thank everyone who joined us this afternoon. Thank you for anyone in the public who was watching virtually. Thanks for everyone who was on the panel. And that does conclude today's meeting. I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So motion.
Second.
Motion has been moved in second. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.